identifications which were created between the company and disease. So what I'm trying to say here is that this particular issue, okay, this particular issue relates very much to the concept of body as a social construction. So that means when you talk about self, we have two entities, there are two units of analysis here. One analyzing physical body as one self, or you can say external part of it. And then the other one is the innermost self, which is inside the body. It's another dimension. If I could use the word spiritual dimension. So man as a material being and man as a non-material being, that could be the simplest way to understand. So the key word here is about the social construction of self. So social construction of human body implies several meanings. As mentioned just now, one is in the legal perspective. Through company law, we have a separate legal entity. Even you own the company, even it's run by one person, you can have two, you can be the employer, you can also be the employee. So in other words, the concept of embodiment, in this case, is necessary requirement. So when we talk about social construction of self, this includes understanding body as the gendered body, understanding body as the sexual body, and understanding body as the commodified body, the disciplined body, the clean body, and the dead body. So in other words, what is more important here is the concept of embodiment, and it's a requirement for our social identification. And for that matter, when we talk about the concept of embodiment, it carries meanings attached to it, and the contextualization principle is significant. Okay, significant, right? So how do you, let me move on to the next slide. How do you talk about this issue of the inner, what do you call it, the physical self and the innermost self, which I mentioned about emotional and spiritual dimension of self? So what kind of example that I can figure out here? So I would like to say something about body and semangat. So this is related substantially to the Malay cultural beliefs on semangat. So body and innermost self, semangat, are intimately connected. So any strength or weakness of the semangat is transmitted to the body and vice versa. So they are both weakened by illness, care or worry, and above all by fear. So only the semangat, when the semangat is weakened, is in a weakened condition, a spirit can enter into the body and cause some disruption. This dependence of the body on the semangat makes it natural that black magic against a person or thing works via the semangat. So we do understand about the concept of witchcraft, the concept of sorcery, and the concept of black magic. And the black magic works through semangat. So that means it's not through the physical dimension of man or through the physical dimension of the body, but it works in the innermost self. That is the semangat. In this particular context, we talk about semangat. So one form of the magic here works by extracting the semangat, leaving the body out of control. And as a result of this extracting the semangat, we are taking away the innermost self from the body, the actual body. So then the body becomes out of control. And the result is not death, but madness. So you become wild and perhaps can lead to some kind of insanity, or the word here I'm using here is the word madness. So the symptoms of which are loss of memory, uncertain speech, and failure to recognize even one's own parents. So madness from loss of semangat may lead to physical illness. Okay, physical that certain that we can observe, and eventually, if losing semangat is not being treated, then the person can eventually die because of losing the semangat. Okay, this is true black magic. So because the absence of semangat makes the body vulnerable to the entry of spirit. Okay, so however, that is a secondary, not a primary effect of magic which attracts semangat. This is some scholar done by Andy Cott in his study about the analysis of magic, or Malay magic. And we can also discuss about the the physical self. I'm still talking about social construction of self. That means to understand the concept of human body. Here we talk about how the innermost self and the physical self are well connected. Okay. So the other example we can also discuss here is about body and body. So again, so body and body, and body is not semangat in Malay cultural beliefs. This is a study done by Lederman. So this innermost self semangat has to be differentiated from body. The Malay believes that the body of human corpses can be extremely dangerous to the unborn, to infants whose semangat has not yet become strong, and to people whose semangat has been weakened. So in this case, when you talk about body, in the Malay culture, it's a kind of evil spirits emanating from the dead body. It can be a human corpse, it can be from the dead animals, and normally for hunters, they used to go to the wild and killing animals in the wild, and before they can enjoy the meal, before they can enjoy the what it calls the food, okay, after killing the animals, perhaps in a certain cultural beliefs, particularly among the Malays, they will be reciting some spells or maybe dua, whatever, to scare away the evil spirits coming from the dead body, or in this particular case, from the animals. But what I'm trying to say here, under body and body here, so the body can be dangerous. The body of human corpses can be very dangerous to the younger ones, to the unborn, to the infants, even to the fetus in the womb, right? So if if for prospective parents and sick people, so may have unpleasant symptoms after visiting what they call someone is sick, or visiting the dead body. So an adult with poor semangat may become ill, and his previous illness may be aggravated. So the unborn child may be afflicted with body mayat, okay, which manifests itself as a resting disease. And what are the symptoms? What are the physical symptoms as a result of this body mayat? The baby refuses to eat, takes on the appearance of a corpse, and dies within weeks of his birth. So considering the severity of body mayat, the Malays believe it is a direct cause and effect relationship. It will be a simple common sense among the Malays to stay away from the dead body. So you can see here, if I could explain in a different way. So what we can see here that you can see here that the inner, when we talk about social construction of self in the case of human body, so we can relate the body as a physical self and also the innermost self. So the example given here is the concept of semangat and also the concept of body. Okay? So this is something unique when we talk about body and medicine. And of course, when we talk about, if we look at this concept of body and semangat in a biomedical perspective, this would not be endorsed, would not be recognized, and in their what I call in their clinical practices, or if you try to analyze body and semangat in the biomedical perspective, that means they will not be able to understand. So this, but in the Malay culture or in some other countries of another society, even in tribal communities, they do believe about the evil spirits emanating from the dead body. And also, of course, in Malay context, we talk about semangat as a vital force. Maybe in some other communities, they have their own terms for the vital force within themselves. Okay, this brings me to the next point of discussion, is about the female aging, right? So maybe we can now go further. We talk about female aging, and here we can bring in the issues of physical self and also innermost self together. So what will be what kind of female aging we are talking about here? And in this case, when we talk about human body, in the case of female aging, we can talk about the issues of menopause. Okay, menopause. And according to Margaret Locke, so these are some of the possible symptoms. These are the symptoms when the person suffer from, not to suffer, got come to the stage of menopause. I wouldn't say the word suffering. I would say coming to the stage of menopause. So menopause, in the simplest way to understand, is the end of menstruation, as the end of the cycle, the menstrual cycle, and the menopause produces vaginal dryness, and this is the only true symptom of the menopause, and it could be the end of fertility. Okay, so these are the three common, I could say, how to say that, is a physical symptoms. Yeah, it could be, and this is something common when you talk about female aging. So certain individuals will start some kind of experience this maybe from the age of 50 plus onwards, okay, 50 and before reaching 60. So along the aging process, so one of the common symptoms that we always see in the case of female body will be menopause. And what do you mean by menopause? The end of menstruation, and produces vaginal dryness, and this will be the true symptom of the menopause, and also the end of fertility, unable to conceive, okay, and no more pregnancy because of the menopause. So you can see here, based on this particular concept here, in regards to female aging, so we observe two conflicting views in relation to female body, particularly on female aging. So what are the two issues? For clinical researchers and physicians, I mean, those who subscribe to biomedical perspective, they were looking at the biological changes as a universal life stage, okay, universal life stage process for a female body. That would be one way of looking at it, one angle, one perspective. But for medical anthropologists, they will look at menopause not to biological changes per se, but we're looking at this complex biosocial and biocultural process. So that means when we talk about menopause in the context of biomedical framework or biomedical rubric, the emphasis will be more on biological changes, which are partly restated the above definition. But when you talk about from the medical anthropological approach or other scientists, we were looking at the menopause as biosocial, is a complex biosocial and a biocultural process. So how do we go about understanding this biosocial and biocultural process? Okay, how do let me move on with the slide. Okay, so these are the biological changes that we observe. In the first one, which I already mentioned, and we talk about the I'll call this biologically, the end of menstruation is associated with female aging, and also an increased risk of heart disease, osteoporosis, Alzheimer's disease, and stroke. And all these are, to list down a few of these long-term sequelae associated with aging. So you can see biologically, with the end of menstruation, so that expose the female body to more risk. So they are in a risky kind of setting now. Risky because risk because of decline, because of as a result of hormone changing of hormone levels, particularly on in decline in estrogen. So that means, in other words, in this particular case, when you talk about biological changes, we are talking about the medical view of menopause, and we are looking at this menopause as a pathological condition, something that could be related to disease, right? So the body now is vulnerable because no more estrogen, so that exposes the female body to a kind of to certain levels of risk, and because of no estrogen, then it leads to the potential risk like osteoporosis and Alzheimer's disease and even stroke. While before menopause, you can see when we talk about heart attack, when we talk about body, a man's body will be a little bit more vulnerable because we are prone to heart attack, we're prone to all kinds of heart disease. But in the case of women, because of the estrogen still there, so the probability is low in terms of heart disease and whatever. But once they reach to the stage of menopause, and this leads to the risk is almost similar to men. That would be what we can see from the biomedical perspective. But how do we go about understanding menstruation or female aging in the context of biosocial and biocultural processes? So here, in this case, under this particular rubric or this particular framework, menopause is best understood not as a fact. So it's, menopause is biologically, yes, it's a fact under biomedical perspective, but under social cultural framework, menopause is best understood not as a fact, but as a construct. As a construct. So if we talk about menopause as a pathological condition, so we are talking about medicalization of menopause. So that means there'll be some kind of treatment that needs to be adopted by females. That means I'm sure the popular one will be hormone replacement therapy, right? So that means when you talk about menopause in a medical term, so the word medicalization of menopause, because there's no medicines to treat menopause, but when you look at menopause as a pathological condition, so you are preparing for the hormone replacement therapy, okay? Because menopause leads to changes in your hormone levels. But when you talk about menopause in the case of what we call it social construct, for Japanese, for example, the word menopause is koneki. Please correct me if I wrongly pronounce, because koneki, and usually translated as in English as menopause. But in the case of this, for Japanese, they don't look at this what they call this menopause as menopause as a fact. They will look at this koneki closer to the idea of climacteric. Okay, climacteric means you are talking about the period of life when fertility and your sexual activity are in decline. Okay, for Japanese, they don't observe or they don't look at this what they call this menopause or what they call this as a pathological condition. Okay, so they look at just something. It's a natural process. Everybody will come to that stage. So they look at koneki related very much to the idea of climacteric. Okay, and similar observation for the Chinese community. So they still describe so to them, I don't know how to pronounce the Chinese term here, but describing themselves as no longer menstruating. Okay, so they thought it's equivalent to the idea of climacteric. So that means, well, it's an aging process. It's something natural, and then they look at something positive. Okay, that means it's not really a matter, right? For example, there was a study done by one professor from Malaya, Professor Dr. Rosa Omar, when she did a study among the Malays somewhere in Malacca, one of the states in Malaysia. So from her fieldwork, so menstruation for most of the ladies over there thought that something positive, and even something could be said as something rewarding, because they are now able to do prayers without any, I could say, quote unquote, any hiccups. So they can perform their fasting 30 days for the whole Ramadan, and they can do more ibadah. So they're talking about something about, they look at menopause not as something pathological, but it's more something rewarding and positive and yeah, it's just part of natural process within themselves that all of them will come to that stage. But the most important thing is they look something, they are moving to spiritual dimension. So they get to enhance or strengthen the innermost self, which I mentioned just now. So, but in the Western countries, let me see another slide. Okay, okay. So let's say for Thai women, I think this is quite similar, not just quite similar to the observation made by Dr. Rosa Omar in her study in Malacca. So the Thai women use the term modliat or surliat, okay, meaning run out of menstrual blood. Okay, that means they express, they no longer discharge the bad blood, and they feel that it's some not really a pathological condition, but they are entering to a new phase of life. So that means they can adopt, they can embrace more spiritual phase of life. So now they can go to temple, or they don't have any anxiety about menstruation or spotting, whatever. So they can go to other places, and to them menstruation just something natural, and I could say it's something to do with the concept, to the idea of climacteric. But for the Western, you can see Thai, Japanese, even the Malays, even the Chinese. These are all Asian communities, and they are more inclined to spiritual kind of development within themselves, but not in the case of European communities. So European communities, they tend to look at menstruation as pathological, okay, and whether or not whether or not they were experiencing hot flashes. Again, they look at some possible changes in their pattern of menstruation. So most Japanese women, again, they associate chronic pain with aging, okay, with aging, and in other words, and believe that the menopause is a gradual transition. So in Japan, one can talk about the end of menstruation. So in Japan, one can talk about the end of menstruation, but culturally, this has little significance to their community. Not really a big deal to them. Okay, it's a process that everyone will have to go for it. That will be a bit of the understanding about this social construction of self in the context of menopause. And when we study about human body, we are still talking about the where is it? Yeah. We're still talking about the what do you call this human body. Uh, we are still in point number 1, the concept of human body, and when we talk about anthropology of the body, we should also include what do you call this a theory of emotion, okay, or something to do with emotion. So body is not just physical body, again, not just physical self. We can also talk to the innermost self, which I mentioned just now. It can be semangat, it can be body, but again, we can also talk about the emotion. Anthropology of a body should include something about emotion. So what kind of example that can be figured out here? So the most important thing here is, how do we understand the concept of grief? Okay? So grief, for this is the case one of the anthropologists by Renato Rosado. So he mentioned in his article entitled "Grief and a Headhunter's Rage," and he wrote about this, his emotional force of a death. So what kind of grief here? Okay, so to most of us, we always talk about grief is equivalent to sadness. Okay, just grief and sadness. But in reality, that is not the case. So according to Rosado's experience, he wrote about his emotional force of death. It was in 1981. He, anthropologist, he and his wife, Michelle Rosado, began field research among the Ifugaos of northern Luzon, Philippines. On October 11 of that year, 1981, his wife was walking along a trail with two Ifugao companions when she lost her footing and fell to her death, some 6 feet down a sheer precipice into a swollen river below. Immediately on finding her body, Renato Rosado became enraged. He becomes wild, anger. He couldn't believe it. He couldn't bear the cause. He couldn't believe it. All right, and he goes wild. Not say madness, just goes wild and rage. Okay, and then he kept on asking, how could she abandon me? How could she have been so stupid as to fall? So Renato Rosado tried to cry. He tried to cry. Renato Rosado sobbed, but rage blocked the tears. So he got this kind of anger. Okay, less than a month later, Renato Rosado described this moment in his journal. I felt like in a nightmare. The whole world around me expanding and contracting, visually and viscerally, heaving. Going down, I find a group of men, maybe 7 or 8, standing still, silent, and I heave and sob, but no tears. Lest there be any misunderstanding, bereavement should not be reduced to anger, neither for myself nor for anyone else. Powerful visceral emotional states swept over me, at times separately and at other times together. I experienced the deep cutting pain of sorrow, almost beyond endurance. So this case study, this good example of how people try to cope with death and how death can be made to appear routine. Okay, human beings mourn both in ritual settings and informal settings of everyday life. And this is something I think um, something evident in our daily life. So we have this grief. Okay? And in the case of Renato Rosado, he became enraged. Okay? Looking at his wife's body, and he couldn't believe it. So what kind of grief here? So again, if you still remember, in my last lecture, I talked about grief. Okay, there's no medication for grief when I talk about ethno-psychiatry. So for the Western psychiatrists, they would like to try to medicalize grief. So they try to understand grief in the context of depression. So when you try to understand grief in the context of depression, so for Western psychiatrists, they do have antidepressant drugs, okay, to deal with the matter. If you stay just grief and not trying to redefine as depression, and they could not understand how to treat grief, right? So do we classify grief as depression, or do we classify grief as something to do equivalent to sadness, or are we going to translate grief as what as something as a routine when somebody passes away? So this is all I could say a good example, a good narrative prepared by Renato Rosado when he talked about his wife. His wife passed away while doing fieldwork in Philippines. Okay, I think the second one, I think this is already given when I talk about ethno-psychiatry in the case of Arthur Kleinman. Okay, and this is the one which mentioned grief as a mental illness. And of course, there's no conclusive scientific evidence to show it. So if we listed grief as mental illness, or you medicalize it as depression, then of course the treatment will come in. So this is the one which I already mentioned in my previous lecture last 2 weeks. So we talk about Arthur Kleinman experience when his wife passed away in March 2011. So this is something about grief. I felt greatly sad and yearned for her. I did not sleep well. When I returned to a now empty house, I became agitated. I also felt fatigue and had difficulty concentrating on my academic work. My weight declined owing to a newly indifferent appetite. So you are losing appetite, you're losing everything, okay, because you don't have, because someone that you love passed away. This dark experience lightened over the months so that the feelings became much less acute by around 6 months. But after 46 years of marriage, it will come as no surprise to most people as I approach the first anniversary of my loss, I still feel sadness at times and harbor the sense that a part of me is gone forever. So you see, this is the I think how to explain about this, the concept of human body here. Are we talking about the physical symptoms as a result of grief, or are we talking about the innermost self, which is suffering very much as a result of grief? So this is a dilemma, okay, that we need to understand, and we need to understand the again body as a social body. Of course, we're not denying that body as a biological body. That is a fact. But we try to explore the concept of human body in a wider or in a holistic manner. Okay. All right. I think this is a concept of grief. Let me see. I think okay. I don't have to read this. So again, we talk. This is something that which I already mentioned in my previous lecture 2 weeks ago. So we are talking about whether to have this cultural framing or of the matter, or are we talking about religious framing or for meanings within the context? So it's how we go about understanding grief in this particular case. So that is why in Islam, we rather use religious framing rather than cultural framing. The concept of redha. So we could have this self-reckoning, self-reckoning or muhasabah. And at the end of the day, we have to say, well, okay, it is God plan, and nothing much we can do about it. So that's why Islam, in the case of religious framing about grief, if we use Islam as our source of reference, they will say the concept of redha comes in. Grief still grief, but it won't be. We don't have to medicalize grief. Okay, and we don't need really a treatment, because grief is not depression. It's more about something beyond of our comprehension. So I think under religious framing, we always come to the stage that, well, is a concept of redha, and this concept of redha, okay, is part of our self-reckoning here. It gives a kind of something rewarding, and we at the end of the day, we say we don't see things as a threat. So it's part and parcel of our life. It's a natural process. One has to go, one has to stay. And when we see redha of all the things that are under the rubric of qada and qadar, then we feel calm. So we don't have to go beyond. Some people could not bear the cost, okay, and they don't understand why it happens, and as a result of that, that could later on they can commit suicide. Okay, sometimes the loving partners pass away, you feel lonely, and you don't redha. Okay, poor I could say poor self-reckoning. So eventually you end up to committing suicide, or even worse than that. Okay, all right. I think this will be the concept of human body. Now we go about a little bit to the second topic on the social theory and the body. In this case, I will just touch things in passing. Okay, I will just touch in passing. I won't go into the details. Right, under the social theory of social theory and body. So under this, I selected a few. We have this Mary Douglas, Skipper Hicks and Locke, Margaret Locke, and Frank. Okay, so how they define or understand body. So in the case of Mary Douglas, okay, you talk about the rituals work upon the body politic through the symbolic medium of the physical body. So the word symbolic medium. You can even discuss this concept of symbolic medium in the case of what I call this in the case of traditional healers, when they do the treatment, when they are in a trance state, right? The trance state. So they have a mechanism called trance state. When they are in trance state, they are able to communicate. They become mediator between the patient on one side and the outer world on the other side. But Mary Douglas not just talking about symbolic medium, and she also mentioned about the concept of purity and impurity, okay, in our daily life, or you can say sacred and profane, right? For example, let's say among Hindus, among Indians, they do have this kind of concept of purification of the body. So they will go traveling to India, and they will go to Ganges River, because to them Ganges River is considered as a sacred river. So even though Ganges River was reported in the National Geography the most polluted river in the world, right? But to them, okay, to your naked eye, to my naked eye, to your naked eye, when you look at the Ganges River, of course, based on the report, based on the narrative given by National Geographic narrator, he said Ganges River is the most, actually the world most polluted river. But just imagine, right? So for our Hindu brothers, they will just go there and go into the river, purifying themselves, purifying their body, as well as the spiritual self, spiritual dimension of the body, the innermost self. So the physical self and innermost self works together, and they go into the river and they undergo the rites of purification. Okay, that could be impurity to purity concept. Maybe another example among us, among Muslims, okay, where Islam is our religion, and this coming Zulqa'edah month, so you can see many of our brothers and sisters will be going to Mecca, okay, to perform Hajj. So to do the tawaf, the sa'i, and to be in Arafah, and to be in the Mina, they call it a spiritual journey, right? If I could use the word. So they are not just physically there, but they're going to treat not the physical part of it, but to really treat your innermost self, okay, the spiritual dimension, right? Hoping that from, in the case of impurity to purity stage. The second scholar, second anthropologist, Skipper Hicks and Locke. So they divided human body into three bodies. So the first, you talk about the individual body. That means as a person, as a human being, you have your own rights to do whatever you want to your own body, right? You can have tattoos in the body. You can have tattoos, or you can make other inscriptions to the body. It's up to you. Okay, that will be one kind of understanding of body as individual body. But at the same time, we need to understand the second categories of the body, the social body or the symbolic body. You need to understand that you are not living alone in this society. You are being surrounded by other members in the community. And so that means even though you have your right to do whatever you want, but when you talk about social body, when you talk about the social construction of self, you need to understand we are now living in society, and society has certain norms, certain rules, certain ethics. All of us need to comply, right? And to ensure these things happening, how to govern the human bodies out there in the society. So the third category, the biopolitics of the body. So the state will control, will regulate, and this body can be regulated through laws. Good example of the current situation, and all of us know about it, the COVID-19 pandemic. This is a good example. So all of us need to wear masks. All of us need to stay 1 meter apart from others. All members in the community need to sanitize and to observe your personal hygiene, right? So that means the state will try to regulate, because to ensure that the COVID-19 pandemic stay at bay. Okay. Another example, recently I watched this National Geography. There was a report, a documentary kind of reports about India. Okay, India is a what India is a world densely populated country, having more than 1 billion of people living in India. And the most difficult part to educate Indians will be, I mean, I'm talking India, not here, India. So to do things in the toilet, to ease themselves in the toilet. So quite surprising, right? I mean, maybe in the case of Malaysia, in Indonesia, in Singapore, we don't have that kind of campaign that you are supposed to do things or to ease yourself in the toilet. But toilet is an issue in India because most of them prefer to do things in public, in open space, okay, which is not really encouraging. So the government tried to educate people uh, to observe their personal hygiene and to make sure that they have to use toilets. And the government is trying to have public toilets, okay, and it's not an easy job, right? So this is comes under the third. So we need to control the bodies. And the third anthropologist that I wish to share here, for Frank, he divided human bodies, into four bodies. Number one, the medicalized body. It means that you're talking about the medical management of disease. So when we are suffering from chronic disease, in particular, where you have to bear the pain for a longer period of time. So, so your body is considered as a sick body. So that's why we use the word medicalized body. So you have to prepare to make a strategy how to manage your body. The body is a sick body now. So in other words, you will employ medical management of disease. Okay, that will be one category of body mentioned by Frank. Or the other one is sexual body. You're talking about the body and medical ethics. Here we talk about in the case of medical setting. So if a patient, let's say, for female patient, she prefers to see a female doctor, right? Unless under under what I call difficult situation, okay, when there's nobody around, I mean, there's no female doctors, then you have no option to have male doctors. The problem now here is there's a medical ethics between you and the patient. So are you going, what I call it, to allow the opposite sex to touch your body? All this comes under the second category. Right, what more like we talk about when you are in operation theater for the surgery. So the doctor will look at your body and cut open your body and to do whatever's to the body. So all this comes under medical ethics, and of course the issue here is about for fear of sexual harassment. And the third body, the discipline body. This is more about public health, and of course when I talk about discipline body, that means how are we going to make sure that our people in a certain country, right, will be what call this comply with the medical ethics, not just medical ethics, to ensure that you come this under discipline body. Okay, you need to be regulated. The law has to be there to regulate the body, and hoping that, let's say, good example about this, I get to make sure that all Malaysians, all Indonesians, right, need to have themselves, need to have vaccine. They need to be vaccinated, okay, together with the booster, okay, to protect themselves. Yeah, is a kind of a shield to protect from the viral infection coming from the COVID-19. So the government say it's a must, for example, and then they have all kinds of digital apps to monitor your whereabouts. So in Malaysia, we have this MySejahtera. Okay, all this will be installed in our handphones, and uh, and and the government will monitor your whereabouts. Okay, so this is it's a kind of to ensure that you come under this third body, the disciplined body, right? And lastly, the talking body. To cut short here is about confession. So talking body means you need to make some kind of confession here, to verbalize your symptoms in the form of confession. So maybe maybe in the case of what we call this, let's say for normal fever, flu, I mean something not really serious, right? Maybe you can tell doctor, you say I'm having running nose, I'm having sore throat. Okay, so it doesn't matter, right? But let's say whether you get to see female doctors or male doctors, it's not really a matter, because you are just suffering from a very mild symptoms of disease, or say running nose, sore throat, what we call it, gout, and so on, or even hypertension, you can say that. But once you are talking about something private, okay, if you are suffering from some kind of disease, this is quite embarrassing to say, right? Or maybe it requires to expose your body beyond, right? For example, let's say you say I got a kind of a lump of 20 cents coin somewhere on my right breast or left breast. Okay, and you need to allow the doctor uh, to to see something beyond, right? So this is again, when we talk about this kind of confession, then I think for female patient, they will prefer female doctors to make sure that they can voice out, right? They can voice out easily, freely about even something considered as sensitive to them. All right. So these are the four. I don't know. These are the three anthropologists. Okay, which I wish to talk about a little bit in passing, just in brief. Okay, because I would rather. Okay, this will be the second topic. All right. So what's the time now? All right. Now it's already 10 o'clock. Okay, for 1 hour. So the next will be before I continue. Okay, the next will be social body and teams. Before we go to that topic, yeah, we can open any questions in relation to my presentation today. Thank you. Yeah, Dr. Ina, yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Azlan. There are questions in the chat room. I can just read it for you. First questions from our student Ria. Ria ada di sini nggak, mau menyampaikan langsung atau saya bacakan? Ria, she's asking about tentang apa sih tadi, Ria? Tentang penyakit ya di Kalimantan Utara. Ria?
Ya. Ya, Riawati, okay.
Riawati, yeah. Okay. It's a questions from Ria about upacara perubatan tradisional mind battery sebagai upaya untuk merestore semangat. Nah, bagaimana pendapat Dr. Azlan tentang praktek ini, praktek mind battery?
Ya, di Malaysia mind battery agak popular di Pantai Timur, di Kelantan. So Impurity is a traditional Malaysian and still observed in Kelantan, even though it's not really you hardly can see this event to take place because Impurity is a seance where the patient will lie down and you have the group of musicians. At the same time, you have the Mindo. Mindo is the healer, and the the healer will be talking to the Pak Dukun to diagnose the disease or the illness suffered by the patient. And most of the time, one of it will be the hilang semangat. Okay, when you are losing your water force. So this is one of the treatments that they believe can bring back the semangat to the patient. So maybe from my reading a bit on this mind portrait, the patient tried to get treatment from medical doctors, from other sources, right? But if it is not working, then they have to hold a kind of a seance where there is a group of musicians, Mindo, healer, and the patient. And of course, will be surrounded by the public, witnessing the mind putri. So your question now here, whether mind putri is meant to treat the hilang semangat, the answer is yes. Okay, and if they feel that the modern medicines and other healthcare fail to treat them or fail to treat the patient, so the family members of the patient will decide will go for mind putri. Okay, Thank you. Right.
Thank you, Dr. Azlan. And the second question is from me. It's about body. We also have similar belief in body here in Central Java, and usually to prevent the bad effect of the body, children are rubbed with a kind of herbal. I'm wondering whether that kind of practice also exists in Malay culture.
So in Malay culture, I've never come across what I call this any herbals used by the Malay in treating body, but in the case of what we see, most of the Malays, when they just recite certain spells, okay, certain spells to scare away the body, and you can see, especially mother hunters, when they wish to do hunting activities in the forest or in the wild. So they have a certain kind of rituals. It depends. That means the rituals before entering into the forest. For some, they will recite dua. Okay. For some, they will still try to use the spells, the Malay spell. So either way, they use it to ensure they have a they will be safe in the forest while they are doing hunting activities. And once they're able to kill, especially the wild animals in the wild, they are not going to bring back straight away. So they're going to, maybe for the Muslims in Malaysia, maybe they have a certain dua to scare away the body. And for some who are not adopting the religious dua, maybe they use again the spell. So either way will do. Okay, just the most important thing is to scare away and of course they try to stay away for certain. In the case of body, is a threat to them, especially when you go to visit a dead body. Okay, so you have to be mentally strong, physically strong. Okay, and of course we won't allow pregnant mothers, okay, especially the children or pregnant mothers, because they are in the vulnerable stage. Okay, and of course for fear that they can be affected by the body of mayat or body of the human corpse. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So it's quite religious, right? In Malay culture, they use dua instead of something else to prevent all the disease and also
but this is this is quite recent, okay, because the level of awareness among Malaysian, particularly among the Malays, they need to do things in the category of Sharia compliance, right?
So I understand. Okay. Thank you. We still have 2 more questions. The other question is from Rennie. She's asking about anxiety among people who are in menopause and what kind of support, social support usually done by people in Malay to reduce the anxiety or kind of.
I think we have to admit the fact that we talk about Muslims and especially non-Muslims. Okay, they have a different way to deal with menopause. And most of the Malays in Malaysia, Islam is their religion. They don't really take it, not to say take it seriously, because they believe it's a kind of is a natural process, it's an aging process, and they don't feel they don't feel that menopause is something pathological. It's not really a disease to them, because in fact they are looking forward, right? Because you're getting old, okay, and then you are looking forward that what we call this menopause, because they are more to spiritual dimension, right? Okay, there was during the interview, which I based on what I read in Dr. Roja Soma's book, and the question is about what do you think about sexual relationship after menopause? And this old lady responded to that question. Well, at this age, at this certain age, they don't think much about that kind of sexual activity anymore. They have other ways to do it, right? So menopause does not mean to stop you from to be not active in the sexual life. You still can be active in sexual life, but in a different way, all right? So katanya masa muda lain kan, dah tua lain caranya. Okay, so Saya rasa pada pandangan saya, di Malaysia, terutama bagi orang Melayu, orang Islam, mereka tidak merasa sedikit kegusaran, ya. Mereka tidak rasa ini agak malu ataupun ada rasa you feel ashamed, right? Because you are no longer really a woman. I mean, they don't feel that way. But when you read literature from the Western countries, they look at this menopause something pathological. Okay, I cannot bear, I cannot accept it. Okay, I'm losing my womanhood, right? So that kind of expression. But I don't think in Malaysia we do have that kind of situation. If we do have, maybe that comes with the minorities. The majority, they will accept it, right? So that's why the concept of redor that I'm getting old, there are certain part of things that no longer in function and so on, right? Okay, thank you, right?
Thank you, Dr. Azlan. So the anxiety mostly comes from Asian countries, from Western countries rather than Asian. Again, it's probably also related to Rido, which is also part of religious value, right?
Okay.
Probably. Okay, Reni sudah terjawab ya pertanyaannya?
Sudah terjawab.
Okay. Baik, another questions from Novi. It's also still regarding menopause. Does the biocultural process have any relevance to cultural acceptance on the case of menopause?
Again, what?
In the case of menopause, does the biocultural process have any relevance to cultural acceptance?
Oh yes, because biocultural means you are combining the biological principle and the cultural principle. So you combine these two, it becomes biocultural. So the fact that when someone comes to the stage of menopause, biologically, as mentioned just now, as mentioned by Margaret Locke, the end of fertility, vaginal dryness, and the end of menstruation. That biologically, that will be the changes, and the declining of the hormones called estrogen, and that brings you to high risk, especially osteoporosis, maybe Alzheimer, whatever, okay, and heart problems, okay, because so they're no longer hormones in your body because of menopause. That in terms of the biological changes. When we talk about the cultural changes, here we talk about the perception. Okay, how do we classify the woman suffering from menopause? So we don't use the word they are suffering from menopause. It's a kind of culturally they would accept because it's a part of aging process. It's something common. It's not something. It's not something that only you suffer, not me, right? So everybody is something. Is a universal stage of life that all of them will have to undergo that experience. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Last question is from Alviranda. He's asking whether hilang semangat is a supernatural phenomenon and it can only be cured with supernatural rituals. What do you think about that?
Hilang semangat, you mean what? Hilang semangat mean rituals or what?
He's asking whether hilang semangat is kind of a supernatural phenomenon which can only be healed also with supernatural ritual related to supernatural.
This is something called inner self. Okay, I use the word inner self, and that covers something to do with the spiritual dimension of our body. Semangat is not something supernatural. It's just a vital force in ourselves. Sometimes we try to equate semangat with this motivation. But the word motivation and semangat is not really a good translation, because among the Malays, semangat means more than motivation. Okay, and sometimes when there's a threat to your semangat, when you are losing your semangat, sometimes we can also try to equate the hilang semangat like trauma, right? Trauma, but trauma could be if you have when some people suffering from, let's say, post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic experience. Maybe we see the counselor, the psychiatrist will deal with it. But when it comes to hilang semangat, the psychiatrists, they won't be able to classify hilang semangat. Are you suffering from PTSD? The answer is no. Hilang semangat is something different and is quite well understood among the Malays. If let's say if someone driving a car and made an accident, maybe he has no longer has the courage to drive because he got this kind of trauma. But that trauma is not really serious medical, that you need medical attention. So that means you need to bring back the losing semangat, bring back to your body so that you have the courage to drive the car. Similarly, if you can say when you sleep, right? When you sleep. So when you sleep, we have this our belief, and the soul will detach from the body, right? And we'll be flying somewhere, right? Meeting somewhere, right? Okay, it's flying everywhere. So if you want to wake him up among the Malay procedures, if you want to wake him up, you're not going to yell at him, right? You're not going to yell at him. You're going to slowly, gradually, perhaps you're going to whisper to him, please wake up slowly, right? Because you need to make sure that to give time for say the semangat or the soul come back to the origin, to the body. And this is something that we believe, right? That's why I can see most of the witchcraft, and if somebody wish to do something nasty to you, they will do it at night, okay? Because that was a time where you get to lie down on the bed. You will be in a vulnerable state. Okay, your soul or your semangat will be flying all over the places. That will be the best moment to capture that, right? And hoping that the soul will not go back to you. If the soul is if the soul fails to go back to your body, you die, right? So if the soul able to come back to the body, maybe in a weak condition, right? So you got some kind of sickness, and if that is the case, then the treatment still. So you can see if it's something to do with magic, witchcraft, and sorcery, and then the treatment will go to under the same procedures, okay, because it will not be treated well by the clinical setting or by the modern treatment. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you mind one more questions from the student?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Nur Fikri ada, mungkin bisa menyampaikan sendiri. Nur Fikri.
Yeah.
He's asking about a ritual for the disease, like praying ritual. I'm wondering whether there is also in Malay culture praying for the disease.
Yeah, I think what our sister is asking is about the tahlil prayers, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do have in Malaysia. We do have tahlil prayers to our loved ones when someone passed away. So we always, it's not really a must. You know? The problem is if we say it is compulsory to do it. That is wrong. But we do have tahlil prayers that we call chanting prayer, where when someone passed away, so immediately on the first, at least the first 3 nights, okay, they'll be having this tahlil prayer. Actually, these tahlil prayers is a kind of a communal support. If you look at in a wider perspective, because when you, let's say when your loved one passed away, you have no option, right? If you feel so sad, or you have the grief, you will see the counselor. Maybe you go and see the psychiatrist. You go and get somebody to talk, right? So you have one-to-one individual support. Maybe the psychiatrist or counselor, psychologist, whatever, will give you some kind of formula to comfort you. That is one way of doing it. But interestingly, among the Malays, we are so unique. So we have this communal support. How to support in it collectively? So the best way is you are inviting all the villagers, okay, in your own residential area, to come to your house for the first 3 nights, reciting dua and Quranic verses, whatever. And at the same time, all the members will give you communal support to comfort you. Right? We're saying that, well, Allah knows better. Okay, not to worry much. We are here to see you, to monitor your whereabouts. And it's just interestingly, we look at the Malay culture. They have a certain kind of a standard. 3 nights they will do it, and then you get to be left alone. And after a week, 7 nights, they will come again to see you. How are you now, right? And then after that, they will leave you again. and then they come again on the 40 nights. Okay, number is not important, right? But the way they arrange it. So on the 40 nights, they will be looking at you, hoping that after 40 nights, you will be much better. Okay, much better. And there will be the last point, the 100 nights. And in some society, there will be, they call it Hari Turun Batu Nisan. Okay, at the day that you're going to bring the tombstone to the grave, right? So what is the message here? Okay, I'm not trying to talk from the Islamic point of view. I'm just talking from the cultural point of view. So when the person can bring the tombstone to the grave, indirectly, you are telling others you are recovering. Okay, you are recovering. Because before 100 days, right, you feel so sad. Okay, you couldn't bear the loss of the loved one. And then after 100 nights, you won't have the courage even to go to the grave, right? But once you have the tombstone carried by you and you put it, okay, on the grave of the loved one, that means psychologically, right? You are strong now. Okay, you are in the process of recuperating stage now. You are recovering. That is the message. That is the message. So because orang Melayu ini terkenal dengan bahasa halus kan, penyampaiannya always in a symbolic expression. Kita selalu tidak berterus terang. Kita main kias-kias ya, kias-kias. Symbolic expression in English because we tend to use euphemism in our daily conversation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Azlan. It's very clear, and it's also indicate the characteristic of a Malay culture, the symbolic. Yeah. Okay, you can continue your lecture because we only have 9 minutes left.
Okay, 9 minutes there. Okay, I think because this topic, social body, we have a few. Okay, since we got just less than 10 minutes, I just go in passing. Okay, what we have here. Okay, so we talk about here dead body. Okay, so when you talk about dead body, that means when we talk about social body, you can explore the body in many ways. You can talk about commodified body. You can talk about sexual body. You can talk about gendered body. You can talk about food and body. So for that matter, I'm just going to pick up just maybe 4 themes. Okay, other themes you can read on your own later. So one of the themes is about dead body. Okay, what is so special about dead body? Okay, so the dead body that we always deal is that in earlier 16th and 17th century, there's a religious meanings about surrounding death and dead body. On that particular moment of time, okay, in the earlier days, the body is that body is even though it's a dead body, it's a sacred body. I remember way back in the 1960s when my grandfather passed away due to accident, right? So my grandmother, okay, decided to say, this body is a sacred body, no post-mortem to be done, right? So my grandmother won't allow my grandfather's body to be in a medical in the hospital and to allow the body to be carried out to post-mortem, okay? Because we believe you are doing more harm to the body, okay? So because the body is a sacred body and that to be buried as it is, right? And again, there are many issues about dead body. You talk about organ transplant, you talk about euthanasia, okay? Whether you have an option to end the person's life, okay? And certain countries allow euthanasia. Okay, you can just put under life support machine. But in Malaysia, I'm not sure about Indonesia. But in Malaysia, there's no law allowing you to take away your oxygen, or there's no such thing allowing euthanasia in Malaysia. But certain countries, I heard, yes. I think it's somewhere in Holland, maybe I don't know. And then that will be dead body, and then we move on to, I just go very quick because the time is too short. Okay, and then we have food and body. This is another issue we can talk about. The 2 factors influencing one choice of food. it represents your class position. You have these patterns of unconscious preferences. So you have the working class habitus. For working class, the body is a means to an end, right? That is the working class. Okay, the body is an end to what do you call it? To it's an end. The body is a means to an end. So that's why for working class, they eat a lot because they're working under hot sun. So to them, body is just a means to an end. Okay, body is not really important to them. What is more important is they can work. Okay, but for the middle class habitus, the body is an end itself because we want to show our image, right? Because we are not working under the hot sun. We are working as a doctor, maybe lecturer, engineers, right? So you are more in the office with air condition. Okay, you cannot eat just like your working class brothers eat, right? Of course, they can eat 3 nasi lemak, okay, and they can go out there and they can burn the calories. But if you, like me, I eat 3 nasi lemak, where to burn the calories? Because I'm going to stay in the aircon, right? If I'm going to talk online, so it requires limited energy. You don't need 3 nasi lemak. Maybe one is enough, okay? Because the image that you get to portray to your customers will be in a different form, right? Okay, and then the third one, go very quick. Okay. This is next will be where is it? Body and blood. So we have many issues to talk. I mean, blood symbolism, blood as a living qualities, blood as religious belief, blood in medical texts, blood in connection between bodies and person. So here you can talk about, let's say, blood and religious belief. What kind of blood religious belief you're talking about? In our religion, okay, you want to adopt a child, especially for a child below than 2 years. And to do that, you need to do breastfeeding, right? So after certain number of times, you are able to breastfeed the child. So automatically the child become your kin members, or kita panggil anak susuan. Okay, so you're not transferring blood, you are transferring your own, what I call this, milk to be shared. So you are sharing your blood relation in many ways, right? Because of that relationship, your sibling will not, you become the members in the family, and you have to comply with certain procedures as a kin members in the family. One of it, you cannot marry your own sister, you cannot marry your own brother, even though you are just anak susuan. Okay, so blood in medical text. Okay, these are the things. But since we don't have time, I just go quick, right? And finally, we talk about public health and disciplined body. So we know very well body as dangerous, problematic entity that could attract disease and pose minimal, imminent danger to the society. Because when you talk about public health, you talk about quarantine concept, you talk about foreign nationality, okay, you talk about vaccination, you talk about documenting patterns of disease across the group or even across the country. You talk about labor force and health education, primary health care for individuals and society. So like today we have this COVID-19 pandemic, right? So in Malaysia, we are now moving to the stage of trying to go to COVID-19 endemic. Okay, so you can see the rules are a bit more relaxed, and the government, but for precautionary measures, us, like myself, are still wearing masks, are still sanitized, observing your personal hygiene, and try to keep yourself a distance a bit. The social distance, you have your personal space, of course, 1 meter apart from others. Okay, and then at the same time, at the state level, okay, if someone got COVID-19, you still have to stay indoors for at least 7 days or 10 days. All this still being observed, even though we are in the process of moving to pandemic to endemic. Okay, and we still can go on our life as usual, but still observing certain rules as stated or laid down by the government. And all these are meant for just to make sure your body can be disciplined, and all this to ensure public health issues can be resolved good by or excellent by the government. I think I will share these slides. I will give to Dr. Ina, right? Okay, so you can read the details later. I think that's about it. This is my conclusion. We still don't forget about the three integrated sectors: the popular sector, and the professional sector. I think, I'm almost on time. Okay, so I managed to do things in passing for the remaining slides. Okay, thanks again for all my fun. I wish to thank again to Dr. Ena Irawati and all the members, all those sent over there, and the authorities of UC Pelajaran Bandung for giving me this great opportunity to talk about on body and medicine. That's all. That's it for today. This one. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Dr. Azlan, for this very enlightening lecture. We hope to see you again next week with the topic on the medicine and clinical practice. I hope you don't mind if I invite some students from the Faculty of Medicine to join our lecture next week.
Okay, inshallah, no problem, inshallah.
Okay. Terima kasih Pak Azlan untuk
sama-sama Ibu.
pagi ini. See you
Sama-sama,
next
Ibu,
week.
Dr.
Sehat selalu.
Ya, alhamdulillah, terima kasih. Amin. Waalaikumsalam.
Terima kasih semuanya. Silakan.